Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify a conflict and refrain from any participation in a particular matter involved. Hearing none. Any public comments? No public comment. Wow.
Oh wait, somebody does have public comment.
Oh, we do have public comment.
Brad Pressler is online. You should be able to unmute.
I just unmuted.
Well, I can hear you. There's 3 minutes, and if you'll just address the chair.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Brad Pressler. I'm a resident of South Asheville and the organizer behind Safe Schools AVL, which is a campaign focused on traffic safety along the Overlook Road and Long Shoals corridor serving 4 Buncombe County schools. I wanted to give the board a brief update. This morning, I participated in a site visit at SD's with representatives from NCDOT Division 13, the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, the Asheville Police Department, Buncombe County Schools Facilities, the school board, and the school principal. We walked the site, discussed traffic flow challenges during drop-off and pickup, and identified areas where infrastructure changes can make a real difference. A few things are in motion. Buncombe County Schools is reworking the SD's parking lot this summer to improve traffic flow. NCDOT is going back to their MSTA study team to re-examine recommendations and look at gaps in how traffic moves between Kuntz Intermediate and SD's Elementary. And NCDOT district staff are exploring whether turn lane improvements may qualify for state funding, depending on the outcome of a school capacity study in May. On the city side, Assistant City Manager Jay Dundas has committed to parking restrictions near the all-way stop on Pinchot Drive and crosswalk visibility improvements by the end of this month. Those changes should also improve maneuverability for buses and fire trucks at that intersection. I do want to flag that one piece of this corridor has not been addressed. Springside Road, which connects to to TC Robertson, and still lacks sidewalks and basic pedestrian access. That's a gap we need to keep on our radar as these other efforts move forward. I also want to thank Tristan Winkler for offering to connect me with your Safe Routes to Schools coordinator. I'll be following up on that to explore whether there are funding pathways for pedestrian infrastructure along the corridor. My ask is simple. Please keep the corridor on your radar. There is work happening, and as develops, funding requests may come through the MPO channels. I just want to make sure that you're tracking the progress, so when those requests arrive, they have context. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Thank you. Next, we'll go to the approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Do I have someone who would make a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it. First and second, so it's already time for a roll call.
Asheville Kimroni.
Aye.
Asheville Sage Turner. Black Mountain Archie Portiller.
Aye.
DOT Division 13 Billy Clark.
Aye.
DOT Division 14 Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Buncombe County Drew Ball.
Aye.
Buncombe County Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Canton Dr. Ralph Hamlet.
Aye.
Flat Rock Emily Whitmire. Fletcher Kim Player.
Aye.
Haywood County Brandon Rogers. Haywood County Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Henderson County Jay Egall.
Aye.
Henderson County Sheila Franklin.
Aye.
Hendersonville Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park George Banta.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest Drew Stevens.
Aye.
Urban Transit Susan Bean. Aye. Waynesville Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
Weaverville Mark Endries.
Aye.
And Woodson Jim McAllister.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to our one piece of business today is the congestion management process biennial data report.
All right. 1 second. I'll get that up on the screen. Okay, as the chair stated, this is our one business item for today. It is the congestion management processes biennial update. First of all, what is the congestion management process of the CMP? That is a federally required document for large MPOs to evaluate and measure congestion in the MPO planning area. So as you may remember as part of your orientation, one of the perks of being a larger MPO is we get a direct allotment of federal funds. However, with that, with greater federal funding comes greater responsibilities, and this is one of our responsibilities, is to maintain a congestion management process. Besides evaluating and measuring congestion, we do make recommendations on how congestion should be addressed. That's primarily done through the original framework that was done in 2019 and passed by this board. So it looks at a lot of the different corridors as part of this process and makes some of those high-level recommendations about what are the ways that we should deal with congestion in the region. And so this report, and there have been others, have been biennial updates that basically follow up to evaluate how congestion in our region is changing. And with the events that we've had since 2019, it's changed a lot, as a spoiler alert. And also just to note, we did miss our last biennial update by a few months. My apologies. We can work on the words for that. So some other CMP basics. This report doesn't cover every single road in the region. As part of the original CMP, we filtered through to have this focus on the roads that are causing the lion's share of congestion in the region. So we looked at traffic volumes, we looked at present day volume to capacity, we looked at truck volumes, and we looked at projected volume to capacity to sort out what routes we really need to be monitoring as part of this process. So again, this doesn't include every road or every congestion area in the region. As something we noted in the TCC is, there's likely some secondary roads that have some hotspots but are not reflected in this report. And also to note, this is a data-heavy report, and a lot of the data that we deal with doesn't apply on every road. We don't have the same data for every road in the region. And finally, I'll note, our CMP is somewhat unique. In 2019, we made a lot of our recommendations based on land use, transportation, and demographic context, i.e., the CMP makes different recommendations for how to deal with congestion on facilities like I-26 versus some of the main streets in a lot of our downtown areas. Those might be areas both experiencing congestion, but the CMP recognizes that different strategies should be used. So to get into it, one of the first things that we poll with the CMP is the total hours of regional delay. So this data comes from a company called INRIX, and they track essentially how many hours people in our region, both residents and travelers, experience delay throughout the 5-county area. I think the main takeaway here is since 2019, we saw a significant decline in hours of delay. That wasn't a huge surprise. What's a little more surprising is we haven't seen that get back up to pre-2020 levels. Believe it or not. And so we have seen it creep up a little bit since 2023, but just to note, we are still a good ways away from 2019. Another interesting thing is there's data that attributes the cause of congestion to the amount of congestion in the region. And one of the big changes since before the pandemic, based on this data set, is a significant decline in what's called recurrent congestion. That's kind of your typical, what you think of traffic jams. When, the factory's whistle blows at the end of the day and Fred Flintstone and everyone else jumps on the road. That's your recurrent congestion events. That was the majority of congestion based on this data set prior to 2019. That has dropped off significantly and has remained significantly decreased since then. However, there are some areas, incidents in work zones have gone up significantly. As you all know, we have some significant work zones in the region. The next couple of slides, they don't look like terribly much, but I've got to give a shout out to Daisy and Nicole on our team because these two slides took more work than just about the rest of it. But this looks at travel time reliability. I won't get into all the nooks and crannies on that, but there's a measure known as the Planning Time Index that measures how reliable is a stretch of road. How likely, if you take that road every single day, how likely are you to have one of those days where it's going to take a lot longer? And so to note, one thing in our region that's a little unique is we really do not have much morning congestion. Based on this, less than 7% of our region's congested roads are considered unreliable based on this metric in the mornings. And it kind of makes sense. We have a lot of retirees. We have a workforce that is not exactly structured towards typical 9-to-5 jobs. And we have something we'll cover in a minute is we have more remote workers. Just to me, I say this every couple of years when we do this. One of the easiest jobs in this region is whoever does the morning congestion report. However, for our region, this is the afternoon. That goes up significantly. Red is bad. That's where a lot of our region experiences a lot of recurring congestion events. I think that lines up pretty well, at least with personal experiences. And again, that goes along pretty well with the context. These numbers are down a teensy bit from the last time we did this report, but the kind of key takeaway here is afternoon congestion, kind of the 4 to 6 p.m. period. That's where our region really sees a lot more congestion compared to the morning. The report also includes what's called top bottlenecks. Sorry, that's hard to see in the room. The thing that's not a big surprise is I-26 is on the list for top 10 bottlenecks in the region. The other thing to note is I-40. This isn't the first time I-40 has come up, but obviously with all the work going on through the gorge, it has created a lot of congestion, a lot of bottlenecks that have impacted a lot of things through the region. I-40, the resilience challenges through there impact a lot of things. And this goes along with something that we've kind of brought up in some meetings in Raleigh where, I think some people have seen resilience as something that goes against congestion. At least from looking at this, I think it's something that, it helps buttress our roads. It helps support them in virtually the same way. Our unresilient roads are some of our biggest bottlenecks. Also in the report, I won't go through all of these, but we did pull non-interstate bottlenecks for each of our counties. So that's something we hope will be helpful for a lot of folks. This is based on a lot of that same travel delay data. So we've got Buncombe, Henderson, Haywood, and Madison County. Tim, believe it or not, Hot Springs is pretty high up on the list. You may have heard a thing or two. Also, this report talks a little bit about how we move around, i.e. some of the factors that play into how congestion happens. But a lot of this data is based on commuting. Commuting does play a fairly outsized role in terms of what kinds of trips cause congestion. So to note, for our region, the vast majority of workers report driving alone to and from work. That's over 73%. The next largest is people reporting working from home at over 14%, followed by carpooling at just under 9%. This data comes from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey. So to note, it is survey data, and there is a margin of error and other things to consider with this. But one interesting thing we've noted over the years is the percent and the total of people reporting to drive alone to and from work has been decreasing. And that's not just a pandemic artifact. The percentage actually peaked in 2015 and has been mostly decreasing since then. And with our growth, the sum of people driving alone, that's taken a little longer to catch up, but an interesting trend. A big part of that trend on the other side of the balance sheet is the rise of working from home. We are seeing a lot more people working from home. And to note, our region was big on this before the pandemic. We were doing this before it was cool. So in 2019, when we were updating the MTP, one thing we noticed is our region had the 6th highest percentage of people working from home for any metro area in the country. And it makes sense. A lot of the areas that are on top of the list are scenic areas that are a couple of hours from very large job centers, places like Charlotte. In terms of other modes of transportation, carpooling, public transportation, walking, and biking, the percentages have been basically stagnant through the region. Carpooling saw a decline for a number of years. We've seen a slight uptick with the most recent data from 2024. So that's something we hope will continue. But one thing to note on that I've been asked about is whether or not that's something that's applying to all areas or if there are some exceptions. Just to note, based on the U.S. Census Bureau's data, we're seeing those trends basically across the board. This is the same data set just for the city of Asheville, and a lot of the same trends are in place. And that's important because a big part of the CMP is based on what we call our walkable urban places. So we modeled out areas that we think more people are making trips by walking, biking, or transit. And those are areas where we've essentially changed recommendations on how to deal with congestion. Where those are areas where trying to think about those modes is very important, especially for shorter distance trips. And so in the report, we look at some of the corridors and some of the crash statistics that go along with that, because real and perceived safety play a big role in terms of what people think about when they think about how they should make their trip. And a couple of the corridors at the top of the list, they're generally on top of the list when we do this. Merriman Avenue in Asheville between 240 and Beaver Dam Road. It's a total of 26 bike, ped, and I believe street board crashes in a 5-year period, including 3 serious or fatal. In Patton Avenue between Haywood Road and I-240 with 16 total crashes and 3 serious or fatal. But the report includes all of the corridors in those areas that we consider walkable. Another important thing to note is commuting patterns. So something we've talked about a lot over the years is the shift that we've seen in the number of people living and working in the same county. Our region has seen a downward shift in people living and working in the same county. To know remote work is likely playing a big part in this shift. With this data set, I always stop people from saying it's totally commuting patterns. It's a lot of it is connections between where people live and where they are employed. So with this data set, there are some areas where we get data of there's 60-some people living in Asheville who work in Washington, D.C. I assume they aren't making that commuting pattern, but it shows that economic connection. But with some of this data, we see, the Henderson to Buncombe connection increasing, I believe more than 140% over the last 20 years. The Buncombe to Henderson connection is a major one, but not seeing the same increase. Haywood to Buncombe, major increase. Buncombe and Mecklenburg, again, likely some of that remote work connection. Madison to Buncombe increasing significantly, and to note, based on this data set, there's more people, more Madison workers employed in Buncombe County. And McDowell County is one of the areas where we've seen one of the biggest increases. People living in McDowell and working in Buncombe was not a big thing 20 years ago, and it's getting to be now. I think the hypothesis there is people are trading housing affordability for transportation costs. They're going where housing is cheaper. And with that, their commutes are generally getting longer. And also with this data set, there's a little bit of information on workers' level of income. And so one interesting thing that we've been tracking over the years is lower income workers, especially those working in the city of Asheville, or in the city of Asheville, I should say. We're continuing to see a decrease in the number of lower income workers living and working in the city. But the trend is also there's fewer living in Buncombe County and working in the city. It's more and more of those workers are coming most likely from further away. And again, that's almost definitely a tie-in with some of the housing situation. So that's all we've got on this topic today. It is a data report. However, we are looking for any questions, any comments, but also approval of the report from the board today.
Anyone have questions?
Can we get a copy of that?
There's a link on your agenda that we can print copies.
Oh, the real? No, that's okay. There's
142 pages. 122 pages. It's very data intensive, and you can get.
Don't worry about it.
You can really dig down into it.
A digital copy would be better.
And we can. I'm sure you have a link. Or
There's a link here. Yeah. There's a link in your agenda packet, and it's on the website as well.
Okay, perfect. Again,
I just have one comment, Mr. Chairman, if I might. This is something that is sort of true throughout North Carolina. It's quite common for people to live in one county and drive to another. I mean, I remember looking at this, we've looked at it on a statewide basis. And I think it's a thing or I've been looking at for 20 years in various positions. And some of it is people simply like living in their community. They like going to church where they've been to church. They like being with their families. But there are not as many jobs in their community, so they don't mind driving. And up until a few months ago, it was relatively cost effective to drive because gas was, half what it is now. But and so so I don't know how much we can do about it, but I think it's sort of something that North Carolinians have done for a long time, and we also have a lot of counties, we have 100 counties in the state. So crossing the county line is not a big thing. I mean, I'm always familiar with people from Old Fort going to work in Black Mountain and Black County, and people from Haywood County coming to live and work in Asheville. Some of the support people in my office, I know most of them don't live in Black County because of housing, and partly because that's where their families are. So anyway, yes, I'll just offer that as a comment, really.
I think that's a good comment, and yeah, it's to me, I think it's something. It's context that's important to keep in mind. And that, yeah, cross-county commuting isn't new, but the trends that we're seeing are putting more of an emphasis on that. And I think that's something, you know, we're hearing also in the economic development world. People are having to recruit from further away than they used to. And also for us, I mean, this is, you know, there's a lot of work going on with I-26, and that connection is definitely playing a part in it.
I think Mark had a question as well.
Yeah, hi. Really interesting presentation. Thanks for presenting it. I was just wondering if the data would allow any kind of finer scale analysis than just to the county level. Mainly, I'm just kind of curious how things would shake out for like North Buncombe, for example.
Yeah, so one thing we can actually follow up on is looked at this community to community as well, and looked at some of those trends. So we can follow up with that data. I was trying to keep it under 130 pages, but it is interesting data, and we can make that available.
Thanks.
One final comment is, built some good roads for people to travel relatively.
We have those big corridors that people use for commuting.
Right.
Again, this goes back to people don't really care about borders or counties or towns, right? And the decisions we make affect all of them, whether they live in our communities or not. That being said, is there any other discussion? This is an action item, so I will ask for a motion to accept the.
I'll make the motion.
We have a first, we have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call.
Asheville, Kim Roney.
Aye.
Asheville, Sage Turner.
Aye.
Black Mountain, Archie Portiller.
Aye.
DOT Division 13, Billy Clark.
Aye.
DOT Division 14, Chuck McGrady.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Drew Ball.
Aye.
Buncombe County, Parker Sloan.
Aye.
Canton, Dr. Ralph Hamlet.
Aye.
Flat Rock, Emily Whitmire.
Aye.
Fletcher, Jim Players.
Aye.
Haywood County, Kevin Inslee.
Aye.
Henderson County, Jay Eagle.
Aye.
Henderson County, Sheila Franklin.
Aye.
Hendersonville, Jennifer Hensley.
Aye.
Laurel Park, George Banta.
Aye.
Biltmore Forest, Drew Stevens.
Aye.
Urban Transit, Susan Bean. Aye. Waynesville, Anthony Sutton.
Aye.
Weaverville, Mark Endries.
Aye. Sorry.
And Woodfin, Jim McAllister.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you. Next, we have some rather important informational items that may have lots of discussion. The first one is the potential improvements near 44.
Yeah, and just to note, this was something requested by a board member. And to note is this is something that has been in the news a little bit. And, you know, I think it is an item where there's potentially, in some scenarios, something that might require MPO action. In some scenarios, there might not. And so I think for today, we just asked him to join us, provide some information on what's going on in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So
based on the development that's proposed out in that area and the background traffic that's in the area, we look back at our, we had I-2513C on the books, but it's unfunded. We did pull some parts of C forward, including the westbound exit ramp. But to see what that really looks like and what that corridor looks like as it grows, our original forecast didn't extend out far enough, and they didn't really have as much depth in that area as what we know has potential for now. And that whole area is primed to continue growing. So we've gone back and we've pulled our contractor in, and they're revisiting traffic counts, and once they get all of that information pulled together, they'll start revisiting forecasts and running models to see what those impacts look like and what kind of possible solutions there are beyond small improvements and what's being done out there now. So it'll be a couple months till all that's done. It takes a little while to run those models, but they'll be more robust and highly focused on that area so that we get a good idea of what might be needed out there. And if we can identify some things that'll make that corridor run smoothly and eliminate that concern for traffic backing out on the I-40 and encouraging into the travel lanes, then we'll start exploring options for that.
Like back to Interstate 26.
Yeah.
From that exit on 40.
Yeah. So, and that's a big piece, and we've got to know what that is. And it's just it's too complex for local modeling, and just to look at that one that one small location, we have to expand out and spend some time in that modeling environment to figure out what solutions work best for it. We can identify some things, and we start looking at ways to go after that.
I know you don't have a magic 8-ball, but what are some of the scenarios for continuing spot?
No, that's fine. And it may be a combination of interim and then final, larger scale projects, but interim projects, we have spot mobility projects, we have spot safety projects. We can cobble some of those funds together. If we can twist the MPO's arm, there's some DA funds out there occasionally for things. And then beyond that, since we have an active project there, or we have a project on the books there, it's just unfunded, depending on what can be pulled from it to make this situation work better, this location work better, then we could come back and have that conversation about pulling pieces forward, which anytime you talk about pulling something forward, that means something else has to go back. And that becomes a bigger question. And the goal would be, if we get to that route, finding what needs to be there, making sure we don't add things there that would be beneficial in the long run but don't really impact the problem at that location. It's more like not as concerned about I-40 free flow traffic as I am about the way the interchange functions in both directions from it. So we identify those pieces, and instead of pulling up the whole C project, pull up pertinent parts of it would be an option. Another thing to look at would be, are there grant funds out there that we could go after, especially in light of Baldwin County's lean recovery and the economic impacts of growth out in that area and how that's beneficial to the community as a whole. And that could parlay over towards legislative or some economic impact funds potentially. So TBD based on what the recommendations are from the model.
Councilmember Ronnie, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I appreciate this update. I had sent a email to the MPO staff and chair and the city and the county members reviewing the traffic impact analysis for at least two of the major projects in this area that were proposed, which include the Acton development of housing and the Costco. There are some other rather large projects in the area, 2 new grocery stores, a potential medical park. So I just wanted to make sure that as we're re-scoping the traffic assessment, that we're including all of those and the projected growth for the whole area, so we don't miss the opportunity to make the improvements that we need to make. But also, it was my understanding from staff that we might need to be prepared to update the MTP. And if so, just wanted to get an update from staff around the timeline for that, because I know there's a public comment period or engagement period required.
Right. So, in general, if there were to be a new independent project to address this area that would require an MTP amendment, that's one of the things that Federal Highways looks for when they sign off on interstate projects. However, kind of as Tim was saying, I think some of the steps forward on this, there's a few different ways to go. If it's something that is more along the lines of altering Section C of the connector, which isn't currently funded, that's already in the MTP. That's a project that has been in the long-range plan for a long time. But if there's a new project, something that was different from Section C, that would be something we would have to amend our plans to get the necessary approvals to get that moving forward.
And then what does it mean that we have removed parts of Sand Hill and Sardis Road from the STIP? Does that impact this project at all?
I mean, that was just part of the balancing. Since the STIP's physically constrained, I believe that's what she's referencing there. Is that project fell out of the STIP. Yeah, and keep other things in.
Yeah, I mean, that was, to Tim's point, that project was funded, I think, since 2016, but was defunded in 2023, I believe. And yeah, a lot of it was just projects costs have increased and there's not enough funding to cover all of them. But yeah, that project was directly in the vicinity of the major proposed development.
Thank you.
I have a question for the division. Who's the contractor preparing the traffic analysis and the traffic forecaster?
Patriot.
Patriot?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I want to make sure we plug them in with our state forecasting group in Raleigh, make sure we're operating that on the same page as the MTP, so we don't cross wires anywhere.
Yeah, Patriot's modeled the 2513 corridor, and they've run the models for the various track closures, lane closures, and all those things associated with the project. So they've got the background data that's just including just a more robust look right there at that intersection.
Yeah, they're one of the best, so that's good.
Yeah, I'll just note, we have gotten the question of, how has there been all of this work on traffic forecasting in this general area? And, one very significant development is kind of changing things. One of the main things, looking back at some of the data, was, this site was initially planned or expected to be industrial, which has a very different, the industrial generally doesn't create 16,000 trips per day. And so, this to me is one of those areas where, every 5 years we talk about land use and land use plans, and this really illustrates kind of the need for that.
Yeah, I'd add a little bit to that. When you look at the traffic forecast for something like 2513, that intersection is that interchange is one small part of a global project, and those don't drill down to the individual lot. It's more based on the land use idea. So if somebody's willing to put the funds into, carving a flat spot outside the mountain, they can build a really big structure that brings a lot of folks in. In this case, it goes from industrial to commercial. And the 16,000, that number is thrown around a lot. It's almost exactly the same number as Acton Park, which is going to be across the street. And that each of them are half of what's already out there. So basically, you're doubling the traffic in the corridor. But it's the peak hour you know, when you really dive way down into the weeds of a TIA, it's the peak hour traffic, it's that peak time, that's more critical than that overall volume. So that's the issue that we're seeing with that one specific development, is that peak time really throws a tremendous amount of vehicles in that area at one time. So, and a typical traffic forecast doesn't get that granular. So, by having them focus a lot of resources in this area on the forecast, we can get a lot better idea long term.
Kim, do you have your hand raised again?
No, apologies.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, thank you, Tim, for providing an update. And yeah, I mean, I guess all in all, it sounds like there's going to be more discussions on the traffic impact analysis as well as the forecast with future projects. Correct. So, more to come, most likely. All right. Thank you. With that, we will go on to our next item with Western North Carolina Passenger Rail. With us today is Jason Myers with the Rail Division to provide an update. And Jason, please take it away.
Thank you.
I'm trying to promote you to a
see if that's just happened. It's good to be with everybody today. My name is Jason Myers. I'm the Rail Programs Manager. And as I share my screen here, we'll get started. That has extra stuff on it, but that's what you guys see. Okay, cool. Well, so I'm going to give you a brief presentation about where we're at, what's coming up, and some of what's been evolving on this effort, and specifically how the MPO is going to be involved. There we go. Okay. First of all, I'll start with a little word about the mission of the NCDOT Rail Division. We are focused on both passenger and freight, and also safety, all in support of the economic, the economic vitality of our state in all the places that there are railroads. One of the ways that happens is through passenger rail programs, is where most of my focus is going to be the rest of the day. And I'm going to start with a little bit of an intro about what our existing program is, our kind of starter kit, if you will, about where we're beginning service at. This is the service we have today. And those thicker lines between Charlotte and then Raleigh, and then one of those lines continuing with an arrow towards New York, is state-supported service. That service happens because the state of North Carolina supports that service. We have a contract with Amtrak to operate it, but that service exists because the state of North Carolina makes sure that it can happen financially, and we make most of the decisions that come from that service. The other trains, and you'll see a couple lines kind of diagonally from Washington towards South Carolina, those are long-distance trains that are provided by Amtrak as a part of what the Amtrak board asks them to do and Congress funds them to do. And we're grateful for that service within the state, and it certainly covers a bigger part of the state, but it is not something that we really have a huge amount of say in. And really, when we're talking about passenger rail expansion in North Carolina, we're talking about an expansion of that state-supported service, which means we need to expand the state support, which is one of the things that I want to make sure is kind of clear later on in my presentation. But if I look at only our state-supported service, over the last few years in our ridership records, this is what we've been able to achieve. The growth was before 2018. It just gets to be a little less important when you get, or a little less meaningful when you get far enough in the past. We certainly took a hit during COVID, but have bounced back and are now 59% higher ridership now than we were before COVID, and are hoping to continue to grow. One of the things that will continue that growth is by expanding to more places, and that's where the Corridor ID program comes in. This map is the vision for intercity passenger rail that the state of North Carolina has. It's in our state rail plan that has been out for public comment, and now we're incorporating some comments, making some final edits, and reviewing with the FRA before we call that updated plan complete. There are 7 corridors that are in a federal program with the federal grant, and there are 5 that we applied and are not in the program, but we're still doing a few things. The main one is the Asheville to Salisbury corridor that we're interested in here in western North Carolina. And everything else I'm going to be talking about is going to be specifically about that corridor, about how the CID program helps support it. After I back up and zoom out just a little bit to talk about the context of this corridor in the network as a whole. Some of you may have heard about the S-line is a term for the Raleigh to Richmond project, where Seaboard trains used to run and Amtrak used to run, and then the railroad had been abandoned. What that did is it limited our ability to grow our state-supported service north of Raleigh, which means that we are largely disconnected, with the exception of 1 train a day, from the rest of the Northeast corridor and from all the destinations in Washington and Philadelphia and everywhere. And that train is basically selling out almost every day today. And that limit of growth is one of the reasons why the S-line is really important. There isn't capacity on that A-line next to it to put more trains on. And if there were, it wouldn't necessarily be reliable. Yesterday, as it gets hot, that railroad isn't really maintained for passengers, and it has to be slowed down to ensure safety, and our train was quite a bit late because of freight traffic and the implications of that. What the state's plan is, in partnership with the state of Virginia, is to restore that line, to build it to high passenger standards, and have the capacity to operate a lot of trains very fast and at a high reliability. And what that means is our success in North Carolina that I just showed you, which is largely between Charlotte and Raleigh, can connect with a very similar success story between Richmond, Southeast Virginia, and Washington, and we can have one more unified corridor, which is financially a better proposition in terms of, people pay more for a longer train journey. So that's all to say that this project, while it's moving forward, and it will take a long time to implement this, and we're going to be working diligently on it, has a lot of benefits to every part of the state, because getting between Asheville and Salisbury sounds great, but getting to New York, or getting to Philadelphia, or getting to Washington, or getting to Richmond is really where the ridership starts to grow kind of exponentially. The more origins and destinations we can have in that table, that matrix, the more people are going to be on those trains. So we are simultaneously working on the big picture connection with our neighboring state, and also extensions off of that to places like Asheville, but also Winston-Salem, Fayetteville, and Wilmington and Kings Mountain are all in that program. So I'm going to back up and talk a little bit about what happened over the last couple of years, what we've been doing. And I know that I or my colleagues presented to you all as we were kicking off CID and as we were getting our grants awarded. And this is a little bit of a review. One of the things that we did in 2023, before we had a grant actually, was finish a feasibility study for this corridor. And most of the contents of that feasibility study are still very fresh, still very accurate, and very much in line with what we think this service looks like in terms of ridership and what it might cost to operate it. What we are planning for is a 3 round trips a day service between Asheville and Salisbury, with connecting trains at the other location, and I can get into that a little bit more. And that we've estimated the capital cost to do that. We have an estimate of what it might cost to operate that. All of those numbers will, as construction costs change and as the railroad, as we sharpen the pencil on things, they'll eventually get a little bit stale, but for the most part, this is still very accurate. And if you're not familiar with this feasibility study, I encourage you to skim through it. I'll talk a little bit about the Corridor ID program as a federal program and how it's constructed and what its role is in this. First of all, its role is to plan intercity passenger rail projects, to do the planning. It is not, Corridor ID on its own is not a project implementation tool. It does work very well and dovetail with discretionary grant programs that can help with implementation, but it is not on its own an implementation tool. There are 3 steps in the program: a scoping step, which we are basically done with. We have not yet begun the second step, which is service development plan, but we're all the way through scoping. And then the third step is preliminary engineering and environmental planning. And of course, this is a new program in US DOT created by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And you can see the map of all the different corridors around the country. There's some of the smaller ones, including Winston-Salem to Raleigh, which don't quite appear on here because the scale's off, but you can see how much of it is in North Carolina. The service development plan is really the key part and the main next step, and I'll put it very simply, the service development plan is an operational plan for how service should operate and primarily focus on the projects that have to be built. One of the ways to look at that is that we have a railroad built to, mid-20th century standards and then largely kind of decline to be just kind of an end-of-the-road local delivery sort of railroad. And the railroad did just do a massive amount of repairs to it after the hurricane, and they're going to operate the first freight train on it this Saturday, I understand, the section that had been out in Old Fort. We should celebrate that, but it doesn't have the signaling system. It doesn't allow for the speeds that it will make for appropriate passenger trains. So there's a lot of projects that we know we need. There may be other things that we haven't yet identified that we'll have to find. And the goal of the program is to feed a project pipeline to complete PE and NEPA so those projects are ready for construction, final design construction. Now I'm going to shift to what's happening now, what's happened most recently, and what will be happening into the future here. So one of the things that happened is that in 2025, and I mean within a few weeks after, we submitted all of our step 1 materials to the FBRMPO for review, and we called them up and said, hey, we know you aren't supposed to have comments for us yet, but how's it going? Are we going to get comments in time, and should we be excited about this? And they kind of said, yeah, about that. And basically told us that they were going to be introducing a delay because of some program changes, and the staff at the FRA that I was speaking with didn't necessarily know what that was going to mean, but what it ended up turning into was about a 6-month just sit around and wait delay while the FRA revamped and kind of reorganized the program. They're through that now. They've given us the comments right before the end of the year. We've incorporated those comments, and now we, I think, are waiting for an invitation to move into step 2. What those changes were, I'll take it pretty simply, but most corridors, including this one, are being required to do a slightly reduced scope, what they're calling a core SDP, which focuses primarily on feasibility, ridership and revenue, and kind of what the schedule is. And really, it's a little bit more in-depth than the feasibility study we did, but it's not all that different, and therefore we think that it's going to be a relatively quick and easy exercise to get through that once we can start, because we've done so much work with that feasibility study. It simplifies most of the tasks of the service development plan, but it does include most of the same elements and has the same focus, just without the quite as in-depth relationship with the railroads, and without quite as much detail on some of the preliminary engineering or the conceptual engineering. So we're now complete with step 1 on Asheville to Salisbury. We had a call with the FRA while I was in the car here, and the professional staff that review these things said they don't have any major comments. It's on to their legal team, and we should get something by the end of the month. And how that then moves into being invited to actually go into step 2 is something that we're not quite sure about yet. It appears as if no corridors are moving very quickly through this process, but I think we are in the best position of any of the corridors that are ready nationwide. Another thing that we've done, and this was finished right around the end of the year, beginning of the year, was we did an economic impact study for the Asheville to Salisbury service and what implementing the project would do for the economy in North Carolina, and also what does operating the service do for the economy in North Carolina. And these are just some of the facts in that. Implementing the project, and that's all the capital work that we expect to do, is over 5,000 job years. That's one person working for 1 year. It might be 50 people working for a tenth of a year. There's a lot of different ways to add that up. And over $1 billion of economic output, and also state and local tax revenue kind of returning through that economic output. On a recurring basis, and this is once the trains are operating, the people who are working on those trains, the supply base that manages those trains, and the impacts to how it affects the economy of the places it serves, that's almost $60 million of economic impact every year estimated. The NC State Institute of Transportation Research and Education did this work for us, and this is also on DOT's website, and I encourage you to take a peek. One of the things that I want to kind of talk about how we're moving forward with is in this logical construct of there being a 3-legged stool that we need to have in place to support a successful intercity passenger rail service. All 3 of these things are necessary, and if any one of them doesn't exist, we have to wait until the other one's in place. So it is a relatively methodical process, but one of those things is ongoing financial support. And one of the things that I want to communicate is that I cannot tell you what that will exactly be. We have estimates over what that will cost, And as we negotiate with the railroad, those will be sharpened, but it is not a civil servant inside the DOT's decision to provide that or to decide it's a good idea. So that's something that I can't promise, but it's something we're working on. The next thing is actually the existence of trains, the physical rolling stock, the passenger rail equipment that we want to operate on. Right now, there is no rolling stock in this country to start new service, basically. It is starting to come into place. There are trains being built today in Lexington, North Carolina, that will help serve the entire nation's passenger rail needs for the future. Those same types of train cars by Siemens are also being built in California. Some of them are in testing with Amtrak, and as those start rolling into service, including in North Carolina, probably next year, maybe the year after, that will start to loosen up a little bit. But it will be until probably 2031, 2032 before that same new equipment is operating our trains between Charlotte and Raleigh. And that's the time in which we should be able to have equipment to operate in service, is really on that timeline. So no matter how fast we go the other things, we don't have any trains that we can get within 5 years or so. And that gives us time to get everything else in place, but it also means we can't go any faster with that and still have success. And then the last thing is we don't own the railroads. If we want to increase or decrease the speed on I-40 or add a lane to it, we do that because DOT, that's our asset, and we do that. If we want to do something on Norfolk Southern between Asheville and Salisbury, we need their permission, we need their buy-in, it needs to make financial sense to them, and we're going to operate on their speed of how important it is to their business, unfortunately. And it can be a very frustrating thing, but it is something that, at least in this case, we have a really good partner with Norfolk Southern, and that they have been consistently telling us that they want this service to be on their train or on their railroad. I think they see a financial benefit to it, to their business, and will probably negotiate in ways that'll continue to make it financially attractive for them. But identifying, and then one of the other things about it is that railroad historically had held a lot more trains than it holds today. And Norfolk Southern, I don't think they want a little bit of growth and want a little bit of improvement and a little bit of efficiency. But whenever you're restoring things that used to be there over the last 50 years of before there were highways and before airports and commercial air travel were a thing, it can be a lot easier to put those things back than it is to build something brand new where it never existed before. So we're blessed with a railroad that has that kind of latent capacity we can put back. There are other situations where there's just as many trains today as there were in history because the industry's consolidated down to more traffic on fewer tracks. Trying to put passenger trains on those tracks can be a challenge, but neither of those situations is the case here. So I'm trying to do what we can in DOT to advance all three of these things as quickly as possible within both the context of corridor ID and in some cases kind of separately from that. One of the things I want to talk about is a stakeholder steering committee that we are starting to set up for this corridor and the other corridors too. I actually talked to Tristan about it yesterday, and as I reach out to the other MPO and RPO directors, I'm getting some input that'll help me make sure we organize these things in the right way. But what we are trying to do is set up these groups to meet virtually, about quarterly, and to some extent as needed, of transportation and planning professionals to help evaluate technical things, to give us feedback, and to help, as a whole, weigh trade-offs that might need to be in this planning document and how it will impact the whole corridor. And so we're at the beginning stages of making sure we identify the right people for that. Many of your TCC members may be people who are being asked to be a part of this, and we expect it to be kind of open to the public meetings that will be on Zoom or probably Teams, but that we want them to be I guess mostly a technical exercise. And one of the good things about this corridor is that we do not need to have any conversations about non-federal match to be able to move forward. That's in place. There was an application by the state DOT to a different group in the state government, and I'm not sure I understand a whole lot of details about it, to put the match in place for the federal grant. In the other 5 corridors within the state where we're doing this, the first order of business is to help discuss as a group how are we going to divide up the responsibility for funding, because we're not in the rail division's budget to do that. So we got a little leg up here in Western North Carolina, and we're going to be more quickly into the technical aspects of it. And then I guess next steps, just a few kind of summary things a little bit, and maybe a tiny bit of new information here. I mentioned the trains. There was a work train on the North Fort loops between Black Mountain and Marion. I think this week, maybe Monday, maybe it was last week, kind of doing some final checks. I understand the first revenue train is going to be operating that on Saturday. We should be celebrating that because that happened because Norfolk Southern saw a business case to do that. There wasn't a state investment in that, at least directly, to support that, and it is absolutely a necessary repair, and to some extent, brought down some maintenance that'll help us into the future. So that's great news. We should be kicking off step 2 soon, doing a core service development plan. That's funded 90% with federal funding, 10% with state funding that's already identified. And to do that appropriately and to have good stakeholder outreach, we'll be setting up the stakeholder steering committee, made up primarily of MPO and RPO staffs and TCC members. We are also working with Norfolk Southern. And this is starting to look like a little bit of a parallel process on some of the things that would have normally been within a service development plan in the bigger picture version of it. But because Norfolk Southern wants to do this and get to certain milestones while they're also in the process of doing a merger, and they need to get to certain places before a certain timing of that merger, otherwise they have to restart, and they want that to happen. So we're working with them as best we can to do those things at the same time. And we look like we're going to be able to use some state funding to be able to advance some of those technical discussions with the railroad in parallel with doing the service development plan. That's one of those, accelerating that one leg of the stool. Another thing that's very much on my mind is all throughout DOT, we're doing scoring for Spot 8 right now. This corridor as a service, or at least the match to grants to implement the capital project, were submitted as a project, and we're anxious and excited that maybe there's a chance that project can be funded at the regional level. And as those scores are coming out, we'll be kind of understanding how that might happen, talking to the FBRMPOs and RPOs about priority points and if it can actually make it in and whether there'll be funding available in those regions, which I certainly do not know. And then the last thing that's happening, all of these kind of parallel processing, is we anticipate a federal grant opportunity in the next potentially days, certainly weeks or months, that some of the things we need to do on this corridor will be eligible for. We'll be able to be freight and safety focused from the grant's point of view, but we'll also buy down the capital cost and improve the safety so that we can operate passenger trains there. And so when that does come out, I'm sure they'll be asked for letters of support, and we can provide a little bit more information. At this point, we don't know for sure what the grant criteria is going to be or that it, in fact, will be released, but there are 2 programs, the Rail Crossing Elimination Program and the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure, actually, I forget the entire acronym. We think those are both coming out, and maybe one or the other of those 2 programs. It would be a relatively small grant, but it would be a little tiny, one brick in the foundation of this project. So we're looking forward to that. And with that, I can put my contact information up and answer any questions you all have. Thank you, Jason. Does anyone have a question?
I don't have any questions, but you had a slide up there that showed Chicago to Portland, and I've done that, and you get to see part of the country that you'll never see. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But a passenger train, correct me if I'm wrong, but the passenger train, the freight train does have right-of-way, so to speak. And the longer you go, the more you're delayed. They have to go first. And we were hours and hours and hours delayed, but we knew that. It's always hours and hours and hours delayed. And they've gotten better, but it's still, the freight train has the right-of-way because it's carrying freight, and that's deemed more valuable on time than passengers. As far as I know, and I've been told. But now the Asheville to Salisbury, that's a shorter route, but it's still used by both freight and passenger. So, I mean, I guess you just have to be just a little bit more flexible with if you were going to take that route. But if you did take it up to Washington or New York, that is a longer route, and you would have to let the freight trains have the right-of-way for timeliness. So I guess you just would have to be a little bit more flexible on your travel plans. As far as there's a lot there, and
sorry,
no,
it's okay. it's a little bit more complicated in some ways. By law, passenger trains have priority. And in reality, for the most part, the freight roads that are dispatching these railroads honor that priority. But there's always what is absolutely true is the longer a train is, and the longer it's on the railroad, the more opportunities there are for something not to go to plan. Yeah. Whether it's on that train, on the railroad on the side, or because of the freight train, stalled because of the freight train was too long for the siding, and then on top of that, while it is a passenger trains have priority, the passenger trains have priority from the point of view of a freight railroad who's not in the business of running passenger trains and doesn't make money on them, so there's a motivation issue there sometimes. Yeah. So yes, there is a very interesting balancing act that the longer a train, like a train from end to end, passenger train is, the more it's likely to return, the more money it's likely to make, because the bigger that OD matrix is and the longer those trips are and the less people have to be getting on and off at stops. But at the same time, the more opportunity there is to go have things go wrong. The Carolinian and C by train service we operate between New York and Charlotte, some months makes the state money that helps us pay for the Carolinian, or the Piedmont that stays within the states, because it's so highly used and it covers such productive territory and so long. But at the same time, if there's something that happens, then that cascades throughout the day in the railroad, and that is a bit of a challenge. And to get more specifically at Asheville to Salisbury, I think we'll mention is that one of the things that technically we've been looking at, and it's been a part of our discussions with NS, is in order to accelerate the project, we don't think we need to put a new maintenance facility in the corridor to maintain the train equipment. We think that we're going to be able to build some sort of place to lay over a train overnight in Asheville, and have one train sit there overnight and have the other train that does the service spend the night in a maintenance facility in Charlotte. That's the way we can accelerate the project, because we don't have to build a 10 or 15 acre facility, with vertical construction and new tracks and everything and staff it up. We can build basically a parking spot, a glorified parking spot, but a parking spot. That's what we're looking at. And so we may have a revenue thing where you can take the train from Asheville to Charlotte. It'll go through Salisbury, and that's a long way around. And we are certainly connecting in Salisbury intentionally with the schedule so that you can always catch a train in Salisbury in either direction, so that it is not just an Asheville to Salisbury service, but a connection to the entire network.
Point that's what you said. In all fairness, if you take a road trip, the longer your road trip is, the more likely you are to be in possession. True.
Kind of.
Yes,
to that point that the railroads, work with the freight and passenger to get them all scheduled, I guess a useful corollary would be like, what's our on-time service record for Piedmont service, which we already have as a comparison?
It varies month to month, and as incidents happen, and as there's work on the road and everything, we're generally about 75% on time with a goal of 80-85 on our Piedmont service. And many months the Carolinian keeps up with that. We have an issue that there's very large temperature swings in Central Virginia, and CSX is very conservative on their engineering of when it gets hot, rails can kink. That can be dangerous, so they slow things way down. I think yesterday was our first day of dealing with that, and our train would have been late by an hour getting into Raleigh just because of the implications of that policy, and that's one of the reasons to build another reason to build the S line. But and we're generally pretty reliable. Stuff happens. And one of the things that I almost added a slide as I was driving up here: please stay off the tracks. One of the things that happens, unfortunately, is people, for a number of reasons that are always tragic, end up on tracks when they shouldn't. Yesterday, one of our passenger trains struck and killed somebody in South Raleigh. I don't know the story, but of course that train went from being 45 minutes late to being 3 hours late. And so they're in addition to loss of life. And then this morning we had to cancel or annul a train when a car hit the train, I guess. I don't think the train hit the car, but either way, the train has the right of way on the tracks. Nobody was hurt as far as I know, but it still is caused some delays, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do. A lot of our projects are focused on safety.
Yeah, from my understanding, the train cannot swerve to hit the tunnel. Any other questions?
Hey, Jason.
That's good stuff, thank you.
I'm very excited about this project.
Yeah, and just to note, to one of Jason's sub-bullet points, we will be discussing projects at the regional level at our next meeting in June. So this will be one of the projects on the docket amongst our other corridors on US and NC routes, and potentially others. So we'll be talking about what are our region's priorities. And in order for funding to come through from the prioritization process, it's our MPO and I forget 4 other planning organizations and the 3 divisions along the line that would essentially need to prioritize this project to get the funding attached.
Yeah, the Charlotte MPO also has Ariel County in addition to the RPO and the 3 MPOs.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Next is the fiscal year 2026 5307 sub-allocation.
This is our fiscal year 2026 5307 sub-allocation. And just to review, the Section 5307 Urbanized Area Formula Program is a program that's administered by the FTA, or Federal Transit Administration. It provides grants to public transit systems in urbanized areas, or UCAs, with populations of 50,000 or more. And Section 5307 funds are distributed based on formulas set in federal law. And the current formulas are set under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, which has been effective 2021 to present. The MPO's responsibilities for 5307 funding. The funds are allocated to the FTA-defined or urbanized areas. Designated recipients. The City of Asheville is the designated recipient for our region. UZA designated recipients receive STA formula-based allocations and equitably sub-allocate funds to operators within each UZA. In the case where the MPO is not the designated recipient, the MPO must still determine the intra-UZA funding sub-allocation. For this year's allocation, the UZA received $4,322,617. French Broad River MPO designates 10% of the allotment toward job access, reverse commute, or JARC activities. And you'll recall we just had the call for projects for JARC projects. And JARC programs are funded through a call for projects each year. This year's JARC allotment would be $432,261.70. The MPO uses a sub-allocation formula approved by the MPO board in 2023 to allot 5307 funding received among transit operators within the UZA. Under this formula, Asheville, who serves as designated recipient, receives 46.9% of the total allocation. Buncombe County receives 31.9%. Henderson County receives 21.2%. And both Haywood and Madison County are outside of the UZA and are therefore ineligible for 5307 funding. And just to put that graphically, the money comes from the FTA, it goes to the MPO, and the MPO determines the percentage allocation to recipient and subrecipients based on the formula, and it's also responsible for holding the call for projects for JARC funding. Under this fiscal year 2026 5307 allocation, the UZA will receive $3,890,355.30 after the JARC set aside. So according to the formula, Asheville is slated to receive $1,824,576.64. Buncombe County will receive $1,241,000. $23.34, and Henderson County will receive $824,755.32. And this is just showing the 5307 allotments between fiscal year 2017 and 2026. Of note, you can see on the jump between fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022 when IIJA became into being, we received about $1 million bump in those allocations annually. This is those allocations from 2024 to 2026, and this just shows that the allocations have remained relatively constant over time, which is a slight increase from year to year. So with that, I can entertain any questions.
Questions for Daisy? Thank you. That will be coming back to us. Remember those numbers. Next is regular updates, Division 13.
Okay, I've got a couple of projects I just want to give an update on. I-4700, which is the I-26 road widening project between mile markers 33 and 39. Traffic has been returned to its proper directional lanes. Westbound traffic is currently operating with 2 lanes. This temporary configuration allows crews to safely complete work in the median and also provides additional space for vehicles to maneuver in the event of an incident. The contractor expects to place the westbound roadway in a 3-lane configuration by late summer or early fall. There will be infrequent Blue Ridge Parkway lane closures to complete work around the new Parkway Bridge. And then HL0003, which is a Haywood Road curb ramp project. Curb ramp installation and associated concrete work are being performed during nighttime hours to minimize disruption to traffic, pedestrians, and nearby businesses. Paving and additional construction activities are anticipated later this year. Next is the I-2513BD project, which is the I-40 exit 44 section. Contractors currently working on, they've completed the girder installation for the bridge, and the bridge deck construction is now underway on the new westbound off-ramp Smoky Park Highway. The contractor continues to make progress on the retaining walls and noise walls along I-40. And just as a general note, as paving and construction season gets underway, we want to remind everyone to expect an increase in construction and maintenance work throughout the area. Please plan ahead and stay alert when driving through work zones. Following posted signs and slowing down helps keep both workers and drivers safe.
Good reminder. Division 14.
Hey, this is Steve Williams. Sorry I couldn't be there with y'all today. Construction.
You're probably working on a bridge somewhere.
Yes, indeed. We need all hands on deck. No pun intended. But Haywood County, yeah, lots of bridges. The new ones that have started up is the one on Crab Creek Church Road, and also the one on Max Thompson Road over the west and east forks of the Pigeon River. I-26 in Henderson County, that's mostly complete. You'll see that hanging out there for a while. It's punch list items and vegetation's established. Haywood County, Henderson County, the ones that you've been seeing for a while, the I-26 bridge on over the Green River, so in the south part of the county. The completion date did get moved out just a couple of months for that, but it's nearing completion. Coosa Trail still don't have a date on that for completion. It was delayed because of the Hurricane Helene damage to the construction there. Otherwise, it's the same project you've been seeing for a while. On the project development side of things, again, it's the same projects you've been seeing for quite some time. The very first one on Haywood County, another bridge project, imagine that, did get moved out 1 year, the let date for that. In Henderson County, the only thing to really report on, the one that's there in the orange for the next section of the acoustic trail. Bids bids were received, but it has not been awarded, or at least when I did these updates a couple of weeks ago, the bids had not been awarded yet. So stay tuned for that. Anybody have any questions? Anything in Division 14, Haywood, Henderson County?
Any questions for Steve?
Steve, is it okay to say anything about the bids on Augusta? Or too soon?
No, they were all, the bids that were received were within it has to be within 10% of the engineer's estimate. And they were all within that. It just hasn't been, it takes a couple of weeks for it to be awarded. So there's no issues, I don't think. And I'm not sure if you're getting at something specifically, Tristan, or not.
I mean, no issues is music to my ears, so that sounds great. That's what I was looking for.
It should be moved over to the construction updates by next month, I would anticipate.
Thank you, Steve, for all your hard work in Henderson and David County. Next is Daniel for Transportation Planning Branch update.
All right, 3 quick updates. First off, I want to make you aware of a grant opportunity. NCDOT released a request for proposal for firms that want to apply to the second round of the National Electronic Vehicle Infrastructure Grant Program, the NEVI program in EVI. And a few years ago, we identified alternative fuel corridors at the statewide level, and we've been annually making grants, call for projects to build out electrical vehicle charging locations at intersections along those corridors. And the latest round for applications is open until May 11th. This is really meant for businesses that want to apply to get the capital to have the charging stations built, but then the operations would be the responsibility of businesses. If you know or want to pass on word to anybody to apply. And I believe we had a few awarded in the region last year, and we expect it would take about 3 more years to build out the corridor, at which point we will be expanding the corridor statewide and looking for additional routes to add. US 2374 is a major one we are looking at adding in this region next time it comes around. Next, the North Carolina application to Federal Aviation Administration eVTOL pilot program was accepted, and this is the electronic vehicle takeoff and landing program. So these are electric airplanes, like the 1-2-seat taxi service type of airplanes. And our application was to really focus on connectivity between hospitals, airports, and other rural communities to improve healthcare access. And while building the next generation of regulatory needs for flying everywhere, instead of really point-to-point, point-to-many type of operations. We've teamed up with 2 industry businesses, Beta Technologies and Joby Aviation. And we also have other strong partners like the Raleigh Executive, Jetport. And we expect this to be pretty much monthly updates as this gets rolling. They are promising me lots of information. And then just to round out the aviation news with a fun update, 3 North Carolina students won National Art Contest Awards. That was part of a aviation art contest focusing on saving lives. 2 students won first and second place in the junior category, and another student won third place in an intermediate category, and they go on to the international contest scene, where North Carolina has also performed pretty well over the last few years. So obviously, home to flight, we continue to keep it in our minds.
What county are they from?
One is from Charlotte and one is from Mebane. The third is from Apex.
Any questions for David? Steve, you have your hand raised?
Yes, just let you know, Custa was awarded to Crowder Construction Company. So the contract has been awarded. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Subcommittees, the updates are in your packet. I won't go through all of those, just a few other updates. State legislative, I think everyone's waiting on the budget. So we shall see. I think one thing that's been talked about more than a little bit is the no-mow May that's coming up. So as part of the bill last year, DOD won't be mowing in their right-of-way in May.
For pollinators. It's actually very good for the farmers.
Just to note that there. Federal legislative updates, we've talked about this a lot, but there is a draft transportation bill expected to come out relatively soon, and that impacts both the transit funding that Casey talked about. That'll set the programs for transit and how much funding is expected to be made available, as well as passenger rail. One of the things we talked about in the TCC was, we've been talking about that passenger rail corridor forever. Why don't we just build the thing? The thing is that the path to actual implementation only existed after the bipartisan infrastructure law was put in place. So what replaces that law is going to play a very big part in terms of what's going to be feasible for next steps. Some other events and happenings, this actually happened this morning, but the MPO's IPS plan had its first core team meeting to talk about high-level goals. There will be more opportunities for input on that coming up. Next week, on the 23rd, there is a groundbreaking for the I-26 connector. Tim, do you want to make a quick plug?
Yeah, it's we're going to have a moderate-sized gathering for a media day to kick that off. It's kind of a big deal for the region and for the state. Besides I-40 and recovery, the lean recovery is the largest project DOT has led to this date, and there's a lot of the core of the project is still there, and a lot of benefits beyond just pulling that traffic from 26 off of the Patton Avenue bridges, but connectivity building to it, and we're excited to be moving forward.
So, and that's been worked on since 1989. So, it's a big milestone. So, if you're available, it's 10:30, is that right? On Riverside Drive. Also, NCDOT is working on updating its freight plan. There will be a freight forum here on the 29th. So I'm very thankful for our region's chambers. I know they've been doing a lot of outreach to try to get some of our freight stakeholders to this study, or to this planning event. Also, May 6th, Bike to School Day. Ada on our team is helping with any and all interested schools to put on Bike to School Day activities. If you know of anyone interested but concerned, please have them reach out to Ada on our team. Also, May 6th through May 8th, again, we'll be hosting the MPO conference at the Crown Plaza. We hope to see as many of you there as we can. The 15th through the 22nd, that's Strive Not to Drive Week. You do have flyers in your packet. So please reach out to Sandy if you have any questions. Sandy, do you want to make a quick plug?
Yeah, sure. Strive Not to Drive is going to be our biggest one ever. We have all 5 counties in the Land RPO and French Prada MPO region participating this year. We have close to 25 events, including bike rides and free transit and things like that. So, yeah, got a lot of different community partners on board to help put these together. So be sure to participate in your area.
Thousands of feet sounds really good. Sorry, and just some recent events. There was a rail committee event conference. Don't remember the exact name of it. A gathering recently. That we also held public meetings for the Buncombe County pedestrian plan and the Woodfin to Weaverville Greenway study. A couple of MPO-led efforts, and Safe Routes to School held a confident road cycling workshop recently. So. Another quick update, the prioritization schedule was changed slightly. It shouldn't impact us, but just to note, the division needs window used to be from October to December in 2026. Now it's October to November. We don't have December meetings, so that should be fine. But to note, in May, there's a couple of highly anticipated emails. The first will be statewide mobility projects will be getting programmed from the prioritization process. So those are projects that were submitted last fall. They're programmed just on data, and we anticipate the outcome of that in late May. And with that is updated projected funding to be released in late May. One thing I've learned over the last few years is the closer to Friday at 5 o'clock that email comes out, the worse the news is. So we'll see how that goes. But just to note there. And also, there's a whole lot of express design work going on throughout the region. A couple that have kicked off is 191 in Henderson County, Clingman Avenue in Buncombe County to look at a couple of planned roundabouts. But there's a number of others expected to begin soon. In addition, in your consent agenda were 3 additional express designs to begin. So, and a big thanks to the prioritization subcommittee helping to program those. So, and last thing, I was asked to pass this along. Friends of Acoustic Trail is hosting a fundraiser this weekend on the 19th, the Main to Main fundraiser. There's more information on their website, but should be an exciting event. Perfect. Topics well, meeting in June. Meeting in June, prioritization and prioritizing regional projects will be the main topic. There will most likely be others. Any public comment? Hearing none, thank you for all your time today, and we are adjourned. Thanks, President.